r/AskReddit. Teachers, what's the worst thing you've done to a student? Teacher's assistant in band for grades 6 to 8. I was to help bring the percussion section up to par because they never got love and were too busy fucking off. One cocky kid thought he'd try and talk shit because I busted him for breaking drumsticks. He would put them up against the wall at an angle and stomp them. So I pulled out my Easton sticks. The Eastons are aluminum with a replaceable nylon sleeve and screw-on nylon tip. I left them hanging around and I went to use the restroom thinking I'd let nature take its course. I come back and he is on his way to the nurse and eventually to the hospital. Apparently he tried his trick and broke his foot. Kid never came back to class. I was handing out homework sheets to my seniors. Class clown type balls his up and crams it in his mouth. Class laughs hysterically. For some unexplained reason, this makes me furious and I really want to make him look like an idiot instead of looking cool. I calmly said eat it. He said what? And I said chew it up and swallow it. Thinking that I was calling his bluff and making him look dumb in front of everyone. But he really chewed it up and swallowed it, then said can I have a new homework? I seem to have misplaced mine. The other kids thought this was 1000x funnier than just putting the stupid paper in his mouth. So my plan was a total failure. I went to the principal after school and said I maybe told Kyle to eat his homework today. Are his parents going to sue or something? And the principal thought for a moment and said, Kyle's parents have met Kyle. I think they'll understand. Tell them that dinosaurs aren't around anymore. I'm a preschool teacher and we did a unit on dinosaurs, where all week we learned about different types, hatched an egg, etc. And on the last day a student asked where we could go see them. I said we can only go see their bones, since they aren't around anymore. I'll never forget the look of absolute shock on their faces. I now make sure to mention it earlier in the unit. Knew that a mother was writing all of the essays her son was supposed to be doing. She has been doing it for years. Told her in the parent-teacher interview that the work didn't seem like it was his, given that it was well written BS and fluff, while he could barely string 2 sentences together in class, but that it was so poorly done given what the assignment was asking for, that it wasn't worth investigating for plagiarism. I had to fail a kid whose mom was struggling with what appeared to be terminal cancer. He was going back and forth for months, but never told me. He missed the last 30% of classes, and I assumed he had dropped. But he didn't. He didn't show up for the final. I gave him an F in the class. He came and talked to me about what had been going on, and I tried to get him a no grade or anything else, but I couldn't. He came back and got a C 2 semesters later. Great kid. Never blamed me. Knew I tried to help. Had a little dude who was a terrible sport. Real little dude. Pre-K, so probably 5 years old. Nice kid, but was always crying and screaming if he lost at anything. Played him in Candyland. I continually cheated, so he couldn't win. I won. He didn't. We both learned valuable lessons that day. I gave an in-lecture test for my students, and at the time's up asked them to bring it down. A couple of students continued writing, and I said time to stop, but they kept going. Finally they sheepishly brought them down and attempted to hand them to me, but I had my arms crossed and asked why. Should I accept them? They're late. They dropped them on the table in front of me, turned around and headed back to their seat. That's when I realized I had spare tests on the table. When they got to their seats, sat down and turned around, I picked up a couple of blank tests, locked eyes with them, and ripped them up. Their jaws dropped, and I laughed and showed them that I still had their original tests. Another one I just remembered. Students were giving presentations on their industry projects and had to talk for around 5 minutes. I was listening to one student and it slowly dawned on me that every single sentence had at least one actually, and then we actually did this. And sometimes more. Being both amazed and horrified, I thought this would be a good learning experience for the other students who were also listening. I wrote actually on a sheet of paper and showed it to them. At first they wondered what my cryptic message was, but as the talk went on they all realized just how overused the word was. Big grins all around. I was on very good terms with the student, hi Peter K, and he accepted it in good nature when we told him about it afterwards. When April Fool's falls on a school day, I prank my kiddos into oblivion. I'm absolutely ruthless. Give them a word search that has no words in them, April Fools. Then act like I feel really bad about it and make it up to them with brownies. Brownies, April Fools. Briefly hide all of their lunch boxes. April Fools. And on and on. It usually takes them about a week to trust anything I say again. XD. I'm really sad that both last year and this year it falls on a weekend. I was actually told this today by my biology teacher. In class, the teacher had a fish tank with 2 turtles in it. One of the students was talking quite loudly and was interrupting a lot, so my teacher said that if he kept interrupting he would have to drink turtle water. Well, that student kept talking, so my teacher walked over and got a glass and scooped up some of the water from the turtle tank, then set it in front of the student. He continued teaching and was walking towards the front of the room. When he turned around, the student had chugged the entire glass. He spent that night waiting for the call that the student had died or was in the hospital. The student was fine the next day, though, with only a stomach ache. This past summer, while teaching an undergraduate course, I had to fail a student out of my class for certainly cheating on an exam, and circumstantial evidence of cheating on a previous exam as well. Student comes to my office hours bawling her eyes out about how it would affect her permanent record and she'd get kicked out of the university and sent back to her country. She was native Chinese. It was a good 45 minutes of circular conversation of she begs. I smile and nod and tell her to take up an appeal with the college dean. Rinse and repeat. I mean, yes, I did cause her to fail the class and had a permanent mark put on her transcript, but I'm not in the business of making exceptions for cheaters. I'm willing to spot students a percentage point toward their final letter grade and drop an assignment or 2. We all have off days, right? Worst part is that I wanted to ask her about the first exam discrepancy and she never showed up until the second exam. So I put her in the front row and caught her with little cheat sheets on the second exam. Multiple layers of being hoisted by one's own petard. Remember, students who might be tempted to cheat, you have to get away with it every time. I have to catch you only once. In the long run, the odds are in my favor. Failed them a 3rd time in the highest mathematics course needed to get an engineering degree. The person had a 59 and needed a 60 to get any credit. The person was just the worst type of student, condescending, never gave a damn, never accepted any of my help, interrupted class constantly, etc. They pleaded with me and brought the matter up to the head of my department, and I didn't back down. The head even suggested I just let the kid go, but I thought the person didn't deserve to pass. Found out he left the engineering school and joined the business school. Seems like it was a better fit for him. I have never felt guilty about this decision. Some people do not have respect and should learn that life is not going to hand them what they want just because they have connections. That was the only time that I'll let anything other than knowledge of the material and grades influence whether a student passed or not. I smacked a 4-year-old in the face. It was my 3rd day at my job as a preschool substitute. We were on the playground, and one of the boys is running around hitting and spitting on the other kids. When things like this happen, we have to put the child in timeout, sometimes in our lap, so they don't run away. Well, as he's sitting in my lap, he bends over and clamps his teeth onto my forearm as hard as he can. As hard as he can. I screamed and tried to get him off, but he was clamped on good, so my natural instinct kicked in, and I reared back and slapped him in the face as hard as I could. Of course he lets go and starts crying. I'm bleeding and the other teacher doesn't know what to do. Luckily the huge red handprint on the little shit's face went away before pickup time, and I was offered a full position after a few weeks. We had him straightened out after the 2nd year in my class. I was tutoring this kid that had promised to his mom if I were to give him a test, he would need to score at least 70 or more to go see Spider-Man Homecoming. The kid didn't really try in class and was always doing random stuff and tend to not to like it when I give him some work, which would result in him either doing it real slow till time's up or just staring at it. Day of the mock test I gave him, he scored a 62. Then I decided to screw with him and bump him a 69, 1 point short of his happy fun time. He went home bawling pretty hard, but after that he finally bothered to actually study before I test him. I was a tar for anatomy and physiology. During a test prep session, Told them the microscope slide for histology lab exam was always blue. It was the only blue slide. Well, the department got new histology slides and multiple, if them were blue. 30+ students got about half of the questions wrong. Because of this mistake, we threw out the exam. 1 week into the job I was at a junior high school. We spent the day watching a video on prehistoric hominids. There was one kid with some mental challenges and another who thought he was hot stuff. The latter thought it would be a good idea to compare the former to the subject matter. I instantly told him to go to the principal's office. He asked me why. I was seething and couldn't think of anything else, so I said, "'Cause you're being a dick." He cried. We both got sent to the principal's office. This is late and will probably get buried, but I knew exactly what story to tell. I was a long-term sub for an 8th grade class. I had been there a few weeks and there was one period that was just straight mean to each other. It was mostly joking, but definitely crossed the line from friendly manner. I instituted a rule that anytime someone said something bad about someone, they had to truly compliment the person. So, I have 2 kids in class who are great friends. One is a rapper and the other WAA like a football player. Football player insults rapper. I make him give a compliment. The football player said the rapper kid spits fire. I made a huge deal about how he needs a real compliment because this kid isn't Charmander. They insisted he could. So I'm like, whatever then, spit fire. The kid was wide-eyed with nothing to say. He gets another compliment and we move on. Later in the day, a class period told me that they heard how I rashed on rapper kid. I was still confused until someone told me that spitting fire is slang for being a good rapper. Luckily, I had a great rapport with my kids and immediately apologized to him the next day and everything was great. It ended up being a joke for the rest of my time there, but I was mortified. I was teaching a class to some oil field operators and gave them way too much free booze. One of the operation managers had way too much to drink and kept inviting the sexy chemist to go skinny dipping. It did not go well, and he got fired for his advances. 10/10ths were due again. Best class ever. A kid notorious for faking / over exaggerating injuries fell off the monkey bars. Came to me and told me she had a sore arm. I told her to give the monkey bars a rest and put a wet paper towel on it. Basically our substitute for ice packs when we don't think anything's actually wrong and they just want attention. It turned out to be a broken wrist and I felt like absolute shit. Happened to me the student. Class was all told to stand up after receiving our math tests back. Mine wasn't good. So what he did was start at 90% and if you got that percentage or above you could sit down. So it went 90% or above sit down, then 80% or above sit down, etc. The thing is, he'd already told me before class I had the lowest mark in the class, so I sat down with the last person other than me so I wouldn't be the only one still standing. He asked me why I wasn't still standing and told me to get up, then proceeded to tell the class my mark. I was so humiliated I just burst out sobbing in front of the class, which made me feel even worse. Only then was I allowed to sit back down still crying. Thanks for watching UpGoat Reddit. Try like and subscribe button if it still works.